where she is entertaining other people in the bedroom. He enjoyed having the freak-offs.
She's being asked specifically about the drug use.
She is clearly excited about freak-off.
The courtroom was gripped by a heavy, almost suffocating silence, as Cassie bravely recounted the horrifying moment she was violently assaulted by Diddy. An attack she says happened after she refused to take part in one of his notorious freak-offs. Every word left the room more frozen than the last. But that silence didn't last. In a sudden and explosive outburst, Diddy leapt to his feet, his face contorted with fury. Gasps echoed as security immediately sprang to attention. The judge, visibly alarmed, warned that Diddy would be removed from the courtroom if he didn't regain control. Day 4 of this explosive trial has now taken a chilling and unexpected turn. And we've got exclusive details on exactly what Cassie said that triggered this moment of chaos.
The defense naturally is trying to poke holes sort of in some of the earlier testimony that Sean Combs was always the person in control and that Cassie Ventura was forced into these situations. So the defense all day have really been laying out a lot of text messages and a lot of emails that tell the story of a very complicated relationship from the very beginning. In fact, in 2007, they showed the jurors an email where Ventura basically says after 2 months of having a kiss with Combs and saying that's when their relation started after her 21st birthday. After their relation started 2 months later, jurors saw an email where she basically says, I love you. I'm so excited to be a part of this relationship with you. How she had plans of a future with him. So they're laying out somebody that was excited about the idea of being with Sean Combs at 21 years old and her future plans, but also a little bit of jealousy. In that same email, she makes reference to wondering if maybe Combs should have went after her friend, Carrie, and then said maybe you should have went with Carrie because she could help you or, do the things that you want her to do or something to that effect. But she also said, which I thought was really interesting in that email, Rachel, is I want to be the woman that you want me to be. Like almost this idea of teach me what it is I need to be to keep you happy. And that was 2 months into the relationship.
About how she had to go to rehab. And one really important note as we ended yesterday, Nicole, was this really sad moment that she talked about how even after she left Sean Combs, even after their relationship ended, and she was with her husband and had 2 babies, she's on her 3rd right now, 9 months pregnant, she said that she felt suicidal thinking about the life that she had with Sean Combs, and even asked her husband at one point saying, you've got this, right? If something were to happen to me, you would be able to take care of these children. And said she tried to and wanted to walk out into traffic and that her husband had to stop her. That is the long-standing PST that she has had from this relationship.
What does a man worth $900 million do when his darkest secrets are exposed in court? In Diddy's case, he completely lost control, and it happened faster than anyone expected. On day 4 of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every seat, and phones were poised to break the story the moment it unfolded. As Cassie prepared to give her most explosive testimony yet, tension filled the air. I spoke with 3 people who sat just feet away when it happened. They all described the same thing. Diddy's face changed in an instant. 1 second he looked calm, almost bored, and the next, his eyes went wild. His body tensed like he was ready to explode. His fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white, his breathing grew erratic, and he began rocking in his chair. Security noticed and moved in closer. Then, as Cassie described a graphic detail of what Diddy allegedly forced her to do, he suddenly jumped up, his chair flying backward and slamming into the railing with a loud crash. But it wasn't the noise that shocked the room. It was what? He screamed, "That's a lie! You know that's a damn lie!" His voice echoed as his lawyers rushed to restrain him. The judge slammed his gavel repeatedly, shouting, "Order in my court!" Diddy resisted, trying to shake off his legal team, one of whom was heard urgently whispering, "Sean, stop it. This is exactly what they want." The judge warned him sternly that if he didn't control himself, he'd be removed from the courtroom. For a moment, it looked like Diddy might actually be dragged out in handcuffs. He was sweating, his designer tie crooked, his face flushed. It looked like a real-time meltdown. A A 15-minute recess was called, but the damage was done. Jurors had seen everything. Cassie remained perfectly still, her expression unchanged, while reporters documented every second. When court resumed, Diddy was quiet, but the entire room had already witnessed something unforgettable. The moment a man who once seemed untouchable realized he might finally be held accountable.
Her voice is low at times. The defense did tell her if it's too much, I can read them, but there were many times early on this morning where she read some of those explicit details where she is clearly excited about a freak off and talks about entertaining other people in the bedroom.
And what has Diddy's demeanor been in this cross-examination as well?
There was a moment where Sean Combs was nodding in agreement when they brought up a message that he sent her where he said, you know, one of my favorite times of the freak-offs is when we're able to make love after. And then she responds, that's the same for me. Now, what's interesting here is that that does match what she told prosecutors or what she's been telling the jury all along, which is she did this and she said, but she really wanted to spend time with him after the fact. So he was shaking his head at this message where he's almost, I guess, agreeing that he did say, without him saying it, he enjoyed having the freak-offs and then having sex with her after the fact. And her saying, I agree with you. I love having sex with you after, too.
Cassie Ventura today looking a little more subdued. She's got her hair pulled back. She's wearing a blazer. And she's being asked right now by the defense. This is the first day of cross-examination. She's being asked specifically about the drug use in the relationship that she had for all those years with Sean Combs. What drugs they took, how much they took, what they felt like when they were on them, what they felt like when they were coming off of them, what the mood was like. Anna Estevado is conducting the cross-examination for Sean Combs' defense. And we did get this clue from the opening statements that the defense really does want to paint her.
So what exactly were these freak-offs that made Diddy lose his composure in court? The word might sound like something out of a wild party scene, but what Cassie described was far darker and far more disturbing than anyone imagined. When she took the stand, her testimony began with what sounded like typical celebrity excess. Lavish penthouses in New York, mansion gatherings in Miami, and private island getaways where the elite could unwind away from the public eye. But everything shifted when she revealed what happened after most of the guests had left. In a trembling voice, Cassie testified that Diddy would make sure she drank heavily throughout the night. Then he'd bring in paid male sex workers and order her to have sex with them while he watched. But he didn't just watch. According to her, he directed every detail, as if choreographing a music video. He'd bark out instructions, control every position and act, sometimes participating himself, other times filming it all, either with his phone or professional cameras. And it wasn't a one-time thing. Cassie told the court these so-called freak-offs happened at least 30 times over the course of 5 years. She described feeling too intoxicated or drugged to consent properly, claiming Diddy would often slip substances into her drinks that made her feel detached and powerless. The courtroom held its breath when she presented printed text messages as evidence. In one alleged message from 2014, Diddy wrote, "You better show up tonight, or that video from Vegas goes online tomorrow." Another message threatened, "Nobody will work with you in this industry if they see what I have on my phone." Then came the emotional breaking point. "I felt worthless afterward," Cassie said. "Like I wasn't human anymore, just something he owned, something he could use however he wanted." What seemed to provoke Diddy the most was when she began naming names, hotels, dates, and even other celebrities who, she claimed, were aware of these events. While she clarified that most of them left before the sexual abuse began, the implication was explosive. Cassie went further, describing what she called a system Diddy had created. She said he would drug her without her knowledge to make her more compliant. The male sex workers were paid off to stay silent. And everything, every act, was filmed. These videos weren't for pleasure, she claimed, but power. They became tools of blackmail. "These videos were my prison," she told the court. "Every time I tried to leave, he reminded me what would happen if those tapes got out, how my career would end, how my family would see them. This wasn't just a story of a toxic relationship or a celebrity spiraling out of control. Cassie painted a picture of calculated psychological abuse, a campaign designed to strip away her autonomy and keep her silent. And judging by Diddy's explosive reaction in the courtroom, hearing these long-buried secrets dragged into the light may have been his worst nightmare finally coming true.
They have their notebooks in their hand. They're coming in. They're very alert. And I think this is one of those testimonies where you have no choice but to pay attention and almost be flabbergasted, obviously, at some of what you're hearing, because it's not only just insight into somebody's sex life, but the details are disturbing at times, especially during that prosecution testimony when we saw some of the alleged abuse, or we saw pictures of her after a beating of some kind, according to her. But the jurors are definitely paying attention. I don't see anyone that's not keeping their focus on Cassie Ventura. And also I noticed them taking notes a lot of times.
And the children, as they were exiting court yesterday, 2 of the girls were seen crying. How emotional have they been in court? Again,
I cannot imagine if that was my father or somebody close to me up there and having to hear details of their sex life. Those are young women. They lost their mother, one of them, the twins. So no one can probably quite understand what it is that they're going through. But I think that's something that you think about on both sides, you know, to look at Alex Fine, which is Cassie Ventura's husband, and think about him having to listen to all that's being said about the type of woman that Cassie Ventura was versus the person that's expecting, you know, their 3rd child together now. So whether it's Combs's family or Ventura's family that's there to support her, her brother and her husband, Alex Fine, I think it's difficult on both sides. Seen him taking notes from the beginning. I see him put his glasses on. He gets very close to the screen when they're reading some of those text messages. So he's paying attention.
Now, Ventura confirmed that she and Combs had conversations about a swingers lifestyle, but that the freak-offs, they were very different.
Yeah, so she talked about this idea where I guess Combs wanted her to watch him have sex with another woman. She said that happened 2 or 3 times, but that he mentioned it frequently.
Kim Porter came up today in testimony. What was the significance there?
The defense said early on that this case would be about infidelity, love, and jealousy. And this is where they brought that up today when they brought up Kim Porter's name. The defense asked Cassie Ventura, are you jealous or were you jealous of Kim Porter? And Ventura sort of contemplated, but did get to this moment where she said, knowing that Combs spent holidays with his family, which meant with Porter, did bother her. And she admitted that. They also pointed out that there was testimony where she talked about being insanely jealous overall as a girlfriend. So, yeah.
We're hearing the judge wants Cassie off the stand tomorrow. Will the prosecution and defense get equal time?
Yeah, as long as there aren't any additional motions, I think that is the goal, to have her off the stand by tomorrow.
Why do you think that? What's the reasoning behind wanting her off the stand tomorrow?
In the very beginning, Rachel, they told us that she would likely be on that stand 2 to 3 days. So here we are.
What made even veteran courtroom reporters avert their eyes during Cassie's testimony wasn't just the disturbing details of the freak-offs. It was what came next. After describing years of abuse, Cassie began recounting the moment everything changed. The night she finally said no. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted immediately. Her lawyer handed her a tissue as she paused, took a shaky breath, and looked directly at the jury, not at Diddy, as she spoke. It happened in March 2018, during a music event in Miami. Cassie explained that Diddy had arranged yet another one of those sessions, this time with 2 unfamiliar men. But that night, she was sober. She had an early morning interview scheduled. When she refused to take part, she said Diddy laughed, thinking she was joking. But once he realized she meant it, his mood shifted drastically. He called me ungrateful, Cassie testified, her voice trembling. He said, after everything he'd done for my career, this was the least I could do. Cassie described leaving the party alone and returning to her hotel room, hoping the confrontation was over. But around 3 a.m., she said, she was awakened by loud pounding at the door. Surveillance footage confirmed Diddy was outside her hotel room at 3:17 a.m., visibly intoxicated. I opened the door to tell him to leave, she said, and he forced his way in. What followed was harrowing. In graphic detail, Cassie recounted how Diddy allegedly threw her onto the bed, tore her clothes, and sexually assaulted her while she begged him to stop. "I kept saying, 'Please stop, you're hurting me,'" she testified. "But he told me to shut up, that this was what I deserved for embarrassing him in front of those people." Two jurors visibly flinched. One older woman removed her glasses and wiped her tears. Court reporters, many of whom have covered countless high-profile trials, looked down at their notepads, unable to meet her gaze. Then came a turning point in the trial. Cassie's lawyer introduced medical records from an urgent care clinic in Miami, dated March 9, 2018, the morning after the alleged assault. The documents detailed bruises on her wrists, thighs, and neck, as well as other injuries consistent with sexual violence. Photos of these injuries were shown to the jury but kept from the public gallery. One male juror became visibly emotional and requested a break, which the judge granted. Cassie explained that she told the clinic staff she'd been injured during dance rehearsal. "I was ashamed and terrified," she said. "I didn't think anyone would believe me over him." She admitted to hiding the bruises with makeup and long sleeves. A former assistant later testified to helping her cover up those injuries multiple times during the relationship. What made Cassie's allegations especially difficult to dismiss wasn't just the raw emotion. It was the evidence. Medical records, security footage, and a trail of text messages to friends in which she alluded to the abuse without fully disclosing it. It was no longer just her word against his. When asked why she never went to the police, Cassie's answer was direct and devastating. "He told me if I ever tried to report him, he'd release those videos from the freak-offs and destroy my life completely. I believed him."
Says she was forced to participate in, of course, those freak-offs. The defense began establishing the love that Combs and Cassie had at the beginning of their relationship, how things really started, then escalated. They showed an exhibit of email exchanges that included messages from Combs that read, quote, "It makes me so happy that you would fly from Atlanta for me." And then Cassie replying, "I am a very lucky woman. I would fly wherever you needed me." And other exchanges that said, "Going to sleep now so it can be tomorrow faster." And then Combs replying, "I love my baby." Cassie saying on the stand that she got to see a private version of Combs that the public and even his own family didn't see, revealing she believed that Combs truly loved her. The defense also trying to establish there was nothing coercive about these freak-offs between the two that she has been describing for jurors these last few days. They've repeatedly described that Combs' sexual preferences as part of a swingers lifestyle, and that Cassie seemed eager, in fact, to participate in these freak-offs. Like another message that read, "I'm always ready to freak off." That's a quote. And another one that said, "When we used to freak off, when we were so in love, there was no question asked. It just felt right." And when asked why she agreed to the freak-off, she said, "I just wanted to make him happy." Cassie testifying that she would help get supplies for the freak-offs. She would call the drugs that she took vitamins. All of this to show she had an agency in these sexual activities.
Who was watching when one of the most powerful men in music completely lost control in public? Practically everyone who matters in this case. The courtroom wasn't just full, it was packed with the very people whose opinions could change the course of Diddy's future. In the front row sat Cassie's parents and younger sister. According to someone seated near them, their faces said it all. As Cassie recounted the abuse, her mother kept her eyes shut, gripping her husband's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. But when Diddy erupted, something shifted in their expressions. It wasn't relief, it was recognition. Like they were finally witnessing in public what they had long suspected was happening behind closed doors. And it wasn't just Cassie's family who saw it. 3 major music executives from Diddy's past, big names who've worked with him for decades, were seated directly behind his defense team. These weren't minor players. These were industry veterans who helped shape his career. When Diddy lost it, their reactions spoke volumes. One immediately started texting, another stared blankly ahead, and the third literally covered his face with his hand. After court adjourned, all 3 slipped out a side door, avoiding the reporters, waiting outside. What most people don't know is that courtroom security had already been quietly increased. A bailiff revealed that 2 additional officers were added that morning because Diddy had been showing signs of rising agitation, his legs shaking under the table, whispering angrily to his attorneys. "We were watching him closely, even before." "He snapped," the bailiff said. The jury noticed too. One juror, a middle-aged woman with short gray hair, was writing so furiously during Diddy's outburst that she broke the tip of her pencil. A legal expert later told me that this kind of behavior in front of a jury is a disaster for any defense team. "Jurors are watching everything," they said. "When someone explodes like that, it makes the allegations against them feel more believable." The press section was at capacity. Reporters from TMZ, Rolling Stone, Billboard, and every major outlet saw it all firsthand. One veteran entertainment journalist told me, "I've covered celebrity trials for 15 years. This was the moment his entire public image shattered. You can't unsee that." Even the judge's clerk looked visibly rattled, while the court stenographer kept typing through the chaos, documenting every word Diddy shouted for the official record. This wasn't a private meltdown caught on a hidden camera. This was a public collapse in front of the people who matter most. The judge who will guide the jury, the jurors who will decide his fate, the reporters who will shape the public narrative, the executives who once believed in him, and the family of the woman who says he destroyed her life. As one courtroom observer told me, for a man who spent decades obsessively controlling his image, this was his worst nightmare come true. He finally showed everyone exactly who he is, at the moment it mattered most.
You know, the man has no class. He has no kindness in his dark, dark heart. And he's depraved. That's my opinion. This is a depraved, disgusting individual about whom I wish to hear nothing after this trial is done. The question is he a criminal? You know, is he basically akin to a mob boss running several criminal enterprises? And while it's very clear to me he is a depraved, disgusting person, we have to prove that he violated the law. I actually think it's going to be pretty easy, but I can see what the defense is doing here, trying to say, all right, he has these, quote, freak-offs, you know, weird, kinky group sex in Hollywood. That's not an illegal thing. It happens all the time.
Cassie Ventura, where she revealed that after the relationship had ended with Sean Combs, there was an incident where he raped her. She talked about how later on she had PTSD flashbacks of her experience with him, of the freak-offs. And at one point she came home and told her husband while their kids were sleeping that she just couldn't take it anymore and thought about walking into traffic.
If you don't have the consent of the women or the men, as the case may be, it is illegal. But okay, we're going to argue over whether they were willing participants. It's almost like a Harvey Weinstein situation where he's going to say they willingly took drugs.
Another thing we learned about yesterday was her drug addiction. She said that she had an addiction to opiates, Errol.
They're going to say, absolutely not. He drugged me against my will. Maybe there were drugs in that baby oil, maybe in another way, but I definitely didn't consent to being drugged or to being raped or sodomized by P. Diddy.
And singer Dawn Richard from the girl group Danity Kane, she is likely on the famous people list because she's one of Diddy's many accusers.
Yeah.
Not in his criminal case, but she sued him civilly last year, claiming that she saw him abuse Cassie, his girlfriend, and that she herself was sexually assaulted, deprived of food, and cheated out of money that she was owed. Guess what? You're going to hear from her attorney in just a hot minute. But first, I want to bring in News Nation correspondent Caitlin Becker, who's outside the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Caitlin's been covering this case gavel to gavel. Okay. First of all, let's just start with the drip, drip, drip of all the names, because the internet is really on fire. What happened today?
You know, Ashley, a lot of the same things. You get asked these same exact questions about these celebrities with no real context as to why. And you really hit the nail on the head a minute ago when you said jury selection's kind of boring, but not in the Diddy case. Most prospective jurors who come into jury selection have never heard of the defendant, let alone have an opinion of them. But what we heard today was prospective jurors who were excluded because they flat out said they don't like Diddy going into it. They don't have a favorable opinion. One guy said he believed Diddy has enough money to buy his way out of jail. So those jurors immediately excluded. There was also some laughs in the courtroom today from the attorneys and the judge when one prospective juror said that he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't be able to smoke marijuana for all 8 to 10 weeks of the trial. So that person was excluded. But by the end of the day, they've added 10 more people to that pool of 45 that they're trying to get.
For the first 3 days of the trial, Sean Diddy Combs sat quietly in the courtroom, wearing a cold, unreadable expression. Even as witnesses described abuse, payoffs, and years of trauma, he stayed composed. He didn't flinch when Cassie's therapist read session notes dating back to 2016. He didn't react when financial records showed hush money paid to hotel staff. To many observers, it looked like nothing could shake him. But on day 4, everything changed. It was 2:17 p.m. when Cassie began describing a phone call Diddy made to her after she tried to leave him. Her voice was steady, but the tension in the courtroom rose fast. "He called me late at night, around 3 a.m., she testified. "He was angry and talking fast. He said if I ever told anyone about the freak-offs or Miami, he'd make sure my family suffered." Then her lawyer stood up and made a move that no one saw coming. "Your Honor, we'd like to play Exhibit 47. Diddy's lawyers objected immediately, but the judge overruled them. The evidence had been properly submitted during discovery. The entire courtroom fell silent, and then the audio began to play. It was a phone recording Cassie had secretly captured back in 2018. The sound wasn't perfect, but Diddy's voice came through loud and clear. "You think anybody's going to believe you? I run this industry. Who do you think they'll side with, me or you? I'll make sure you never work again. And your mom's nursing job? Your sister's college scholarship? Gone. I know people everywhere." As the recording played, all eyes turned to Diddy. His face contorted, his jaw clenched. He leaned toward his attorney, whispering something urgently. The shock on his own legal team's faces said everything. This recording had completely blindsided them. Then, just as the audio ended, Cassie looked straight at him and said, "He told me no one would believe me because he owned the music industry and would destroy my life." That was the breaking point. Diddy suddenly jumped up from his seat, yelling, "That's a lie!" His chair flew backward, slamming into the courtroom railing. Security stepped forward as his lawyers struggled to restrain him. The judge slammed his gavel and shouted, "Order in my court!" But it was too late. The outburst had already become the defining moment of the trial. Legal experts watching the case later said this single recording changed everything. His entire defense rested on discrediting Cassie's version of events. But now the jury had more than just her word. They had Diddy's own voice making threats. There was no spinning that. Reporters, courtroom observers, and even industry insiders sat stunned. His carefully built image, decades of control and power, fell apart in seconds. A man who once thought he was untouchable was now unraveling before the very people who would decide his fate. And for many in that room, especially the jury, it wasn't just about the crime anymore. It was about character. The mask had slipped, and they finally saw what was underneath. As one person whispered outside the courtroom, "We just watched a man realize that this time, money and fame may not be enough to save him."